Shalom everyone, welcome back. This week we're going to discuss Parsha Mikeitz. It's been 2 years since Yosef interpreted the dream to the butler, and he made it back to Pharaoh, and he willingly forgot Yosef. And now 2 years later, Hashem gives Paro a dream. Paro dreams about 7 cows, healthy cows coming out of the Nile, and 7 measly cows coming out and just consuming the 7 healthy cows, which is unnatural. Cows are herbivores. And then he dreams about 7 stalks and another 7 thin stalks, just swallow them up. And he wakes up in the morning and he can't figure out what his dream means. So all his advisors can't answer him. And he's very upset and he's getting menacing with his threats. And the butler realizes that he better tell the truth, that he knows the best dream interpreter in the country, otherwise he might be in big trouble. So he comes to Pharaoh and he tells him, when I was in prison, I once made this mistake. You threw me into prison. Well, down there in the dungeon with me was this lad, not so educated, Hebrew, not one of ours. And he actually interpreted my dream for me. So Pharaoh says, bring him over here. So they swoop Yosef out of the pit. It's Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the Hebrew year. And Yosef suddenly finds himself whisked out of the dungeon. They throw him into a haircut. They throw him into a shave. They wash him down. They put him in royal clothing. They bring him before Pharaoh. He doesn't know what's going on. And suddenly he's standing there before Pharaoh. And on his way in, he gets tested how many languages he knows. And in the prison, he's learned all 70 languages. So he comes in and he's mastered. He's like smarter than everyone there, including Pharaoh. And Pharaoh sees that at the onset. And when he comes in, Pharaoh right away tells him, I heard about you, that when you just hear a dream, you got the interpretation. And Yosef right away answers humbly, God is the one that could answer Pharaoh. And Pharaoh recounts the dream, making some subtle changes. And Yosef interprets the dream. He's grown up in a house where he knows his father worked for 7 years for his mother, right? So when he hears 7 cows, he hears 7 years. And he right away tells Pharaoh there's going to be 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine, and all the plenty is going to be consumed in the 7 years of Pharaoh. And here he throws in a piece of good advice. He says, you better appoint someone because you cannot trust the people to store the food. And if you want to have food for the 7 years of famine, you better have someone who's really good at doing this, who can oversee the economy, who can oversee the management, that things don't get stolen, that things are stored in a way that it will last. This takes a lot of understanding if you want to save the world. And Pharaoh and his men look at Yosef and they're shocked by his wisdom and they say, you're the man. And Paro appoints Yosef in charge of the army, in charge of all of Egypt. And he has Yosef marry the one girl who was there in Potiphar's house as a sign that Yosef was innocent. She happens to be the only Jewish girl in Egypt. She has been down in Egypt as an adopted girl in Potiphar's house. Her name is Osnat, and she is legendary. And Yosef has 2 children with her. And she will raise them as well as Yaakov raised his children in Canaan. She's an extraordinary woman. Well, Yaakov's brother, Yaakov has a famine in Israel, right? So the 7 years of plenty are up. Yosef has done an incredible job setting up storage houses and structuring the economy so that everything is protected. And now the years of famine begin. Year number 1, the world is managing. Year number 2, they're having problems. Yaakov sees everyone around him is going hungry. They're all traveling down to Egypt. So he tells his sons, why don't you all go down to Egypt and let's buy some food. So they go down to Egypt. And on their way down, the 10 brothers say to one another, this is our chance. We sold our brother down to Egypt. We can find him now. So they come into Egypt through the 10 gates. Now Yosef, as a measure of security, had his guards write down at the entrance of each gate who came in, what their name is, what country they're from, what their father's name is. And this is a way that Yosef is keeping track of who's coming into Egypt and for what purpose. Yosef has made it law that you want food, you have to come down and buy it for yourself. He is unwilling to have an external market to the produce in Egypt, and he maintains a fair price of the food in Egypt. But he also knows that his brothers are going to come down and he wants them. And that day that he gets a report that they came in through the gates, he closes all the markets and he leaves one market open, and he's sitting on top of the market in a room looking out the window waiting for his brothers to come. They don't come. 3 days pass and they haven't come. They have gone to all the brothels, all the slave markets in Egypt looking for Yosef. Well, they're not finding him. Yosef sends out the police, and his army goes out and rounds up the brothers. They bring them before Yosef, and Yosef says, 10 brothers walking in through 10 gates. I'd say you're spies. What are you doing coming into Egypt like that? Now Yosef wears a mask and he speaks to them in Egyptian, and the brother's like, no, but sir, he says, what do you mean? Why'd you walk in through 10 different gates? You're all brothers. What do you think? You're going to conquer Egypt? You think you're going to take us down? So the brothers say, well, we have a brother. We came looking for the brother. So he says, really? 10 gates? Why'd you do that? Brothels? That's usually where spies go. What were you doing there? So they said, well, that's where we thought we'd find him. Yosef says, I don't buy it. He throws him into prison for 3 days. And at the end of 3 days, he says, look, maybe you're telling the truth. I'm worried God might punish me for what I'm doing to you. So I'm going to let you go back home. You're going to leave one brother here. And we're going to wait because you've told me you have another brother waiting back in Israel for you. Bring him back and we'll check if you're telling the truth. And the brothers start murmuring in Hebrew to one another. This is all our fault, because our brother begged us and pleaded with us and we didn't listen to him. And Reuven turns to the brothers and says, but I told you not to do this. And Yosef hears all this. They don't realize he understands Hebrew. He goes into the other room and he breaks down crying. He sees how his brothers regret what they've done to him. But Yosef continues the game. And so he sends the brothers back and he has his officers put their money into their bags, so that when they come home and they empty their bags with their father, they see not only the produce, but they see their Israeli money that they brought with them. And they say, what's going on here? Now we're in real trouble. They're going to say we didn't even pay. And Yaakov says, why'd you tell them all this? Why'd you tell them you have a brother? Why is it now that I'm stuck with this reality that I can't go buy more food without sending your younger brother with you? And they said, we had no idea where he was headed when he asked us all the questions. And so they need more food. Reuven says, Dad, you could kill my 2 sons if I don't live up to this. And Yaakov says, what a fool. I'm missing 2 sons. Yosef's gone. Shimon's gone. You think I want to miss 2 grandchildren? No way. Yehuda says, listen, Dad, I'll take personal responsibility. You could demand him from me. I am responsible. Send Binyamin down with me. And Yaakov says, listen, I don't have a choice. So I'm going to send you with gifts, with some of the best spices and dried fruits of Israel, and may God protect you. They come down to Yosef, and they want to explain, here's the money, we don't know how it came back, and they are summoned into Yosef's palace. They're very worried, and they're told, don't worry, everything's fine. They're invited to a lavish meal with Yosef, where he gives them wine, and he parties with them. And during that meal, he keeps hitting his royal goblet, and he asks the goblet questions, and every time he tells them the answers, he says, my goblet tells me you 2 used to sleep on a bed one next to the other. My goblet tells me that some of you come from a mother named Bilhah, others from a mother named Leah, and he starts telling them all kinds of childhood stories, ostensibly from the goblet that he keeps knocking. Well, when he sends the brothers off the next day, he has his servants plant his royal goblet in the sack of Binyamin. And as they leave the city, he sends the army after them. And the army shows up and they start yelling at the brothers, what's wrong with you? We treated you so well. Why would you do this to us? You thought if you take the king's goblet, he wouldn't know it? What's wrong with you? And the brothers say, hey, we brought back money because we thought you made a mistake. We're honest people. Why would you blame us that way? And the soldiers say, show us. So they unload the sacks, and the soldiers check every sack. And of course, the last sack they check is Binyamin. And over there they find the goblets. And the brothers look at the goblet, and they look at Binyamin, and they give him a smack. Each brother gives him a whack between the shoulder blades and says, what a thief, just like your mother. What a thief. And they start heading back. And when they come back, Yosef is there waiting for them. And he says, why'd you do such a thing? How'd you do that? I treated you so well. And the brothers say, what can we say? We can't say anything. We're all ready to be your slaves. And Yosef says, no, don't bother. You can all go home. The one who stole the goblet, he will stay here as my slave, and you can all go home in peace. And Yosef has just recreated a scene where the brothers 22 years earlier had sold him as a slave, and now they have an opportunity to stand up for their brother to do real tshuva. I'll see you next week.